experience and whatever, that's what you're looking for. But you know what? It's a flawed system. I'm not an apologist. It is flawed, unfortunately.
But it's very hard to pronounce that all your experience in 6 seconds.
Well, I mean, that's a generalization.
Okay.
Everything's not like that. You know, some people take an hour and some people let a machine do it, which is 0 seconds. So, you know.
But I think to your point, I think what Dean is trying to help us understand is what you need to do to survive those 6 seconds. That's what you're trying to do. There's several other, at least 2 other stages before they get to know something about you. Reading the resume in detail and then hopefully having an interview.
And the other reality is not all jobs work this way. A lot of it is networking.
Yes.
That informal job market, which that's for another presentation.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to talk about how to start tailoring your resume, right? Because like we said, after you get through that 6 seconds and you make it to that pile because you've survived the 6-second scan, someone is going to review your resume thoroughly. And so you don't want to be cast out of that pile, right? So you want a quality, customized resume, right? So the first thing when you're writing your resume is you need to analyze the job posting. So I have a question for all of you, okay? When you find a job posting that you're interested in and you're getting ready to write your resume to send it, where is the first place? What do you first look for on the job posting? Qualifications, okay? Requirements, okay, someone said responsibilities. Okay, and then what do you do when you look at the qualifications? And then after you've answered, I want to know what you do when you look at the responsibilities.
Because for scanning, lots of job posting comes to the board, and for scanning, first of all, look at the qualifications. If there's something major that doesn't match to my qualification, because for example, some topics are very similar, but they want an engineer, not for example, health staff. For the similar jobs, there are lots of similarities, so I put it aside.
So I'm talking about a posting that you found that you're interested in, you know you're going to apply for.
Yeah, the topic is very similar, for example, to my area, and the organization is a hospital, for example. But when I go to the detail, I found that they want one of the qualifications is engineering, IT, or something similar in this area. So, or a specific course that you should pass, and I didn't pass, for example, that course. So I put it aside. But after that, I go to if I found that major qualifications is matched to me, I go to the job summary, because always I found the job summary, if I match to my interesting areas and I feel that I'm comfortable with this, go to the details of the one-by-one areas of the daily workers' responsibilities.
Okay, and then you go through the daily responsibilities one by one, and then how do you use that to help you prep your resume?
In fact, I already prepared near to 10 types of resume: research resume, quality improvement resume, project management resume. In the areas that I work on, I already tailored them based on. And I use usually one of them that is more matched just for the workshops or courses that I have already passed. I use some of them, I change some of them.
Okay. How about yourself? What do you do? So you found a posting that you're interested in, you match the qualifications, now you're getting ready to prepare your resume to apply. What do you do?
Yeah, I check first responsibilities, because when I'm hired, right, after that, that's what the organization expectations are there inside the responsibilities for me. So according to that, so I make my...
According to the responsibilities. Okay. So ideally, that's exactly what you want to be doing, right? So the biggest mistake some people make is they find a job posting, they read through it, they decide whether or not they have about 75 to 80% of the criteria, and then they go to the bottom, and then they decide, okay, yeah, I'm a 75% match, I'm gonna apply. Okay, so I'm gonna start prepping my resume. But when they start preparing their resume, they go to the bottom halfway down the middle, the section that says qualifications, they make sure that the qualifications are on the resume, and then they submit, right? But the problem is, you've missed an entire job posting, right? And the reality is, exactly what you said, everything in the responsibilities section is everything you are going to actually be doing on the job. So ideally, you want to show on your resume that you have the experience and the skills that they have mentioned in the responsibility section, because that's actually what you're going to be doing, right? And so a strategy, a technique that I give, usually when I do these workshops, there's 2 hours long, and I would actually make you go through a job posting and do all these steps, but we don't have time for that today. But ideally what you want to do, so you're going to review the job description from top to bottom, right? Not just the qualification section, but the entire job description from top to bottom, okay? And then what you want to do is for each, starting from the top, from each responsibility, right? Before you even touch your resume, before you even go to your resume, for each responsibility on the job posting, you want to think of examples from your own experience of when you have performed that responsibility, whether it be at another job, at an internship, within academic experience. And then you want to do that for the entire job posting. And then when you get to the qualifications, you want to do that as well. You want to develop a list for each qualification of how you have that skill, how you have that qualification, how you've used it. And so what's going to happen at the end is you're going to have a list of work examples, volunteer examples, academic examples that are very much aligned with the job posting. Then you just take those examples and you put them on your resume. And those are the only things that need to be on your resume, because those are the only things that the job posting is asking for. And if we go back, your resume is a marketing document for that job, right? And so that's one way to ensure you haven't missed anything that they've asked for, and another way to ensure that you have covered everything. The reality is, there's gonna be some things you're like, I've never done this before, right? And that's okay. If you, like, the idea isn't to make stuff up, and the idea is not to have everything, right? But about, I would say 80%, okay? Any questions? So now I'm gonna get into, yes?
Is it necessary that we have to have 2 or 3 resumes as per the, like, for example, my academic qualification is in communications, but I have more experience in research. So I was advised to have a communications resume and also a research resume. So you have multiple resumes. And if you're familiar with, are you familiar with Charity Village?
Yes.
Yeah. So you should have one standard resume, right? Some job postings you can apply only through the Charity Village resume, right? So, with sometimes I think like, what should I keep as my Charity Village resume? The research.
As what, sorry?
Like, you can have only one resume in Charity Village, right? Like you don't have options. To
Like
have
if you
multiple
upload
resumes.
it?
Yeah, upload it. Yeah.
So that's a bit, so the reality is, so you want to ask yourself, what positions am I going to be targeting on Charity Village? Because when you make the decision to upload your resume onto a job board or even onto a company, sometimes companies will let you upload their resumes, you already need to have in mind what types of jobs you're going to be targeting, because then you would create your resume appropriately. Because the idea is, you're right, you can't upload more than one resume. So you have to make a career decision for yourself, okay, because Charity Village is all the nonprofit and social service sector, right? And so you need to decide, what jobs am I gonna be targeting on Charity Village? Is it gonna be solely research positions, and that's all I'm gonna be targeting? Then I'm gonna upload solely a research resume. If I'm open to targeting research and communication positions, then I'm gonna highlight both those experiences and that skill set on that one resume that I upload, right? The alternative is to not upload your resume to have 2 versions of it and to apply for postings as they come up. But you have to, that's a decision, like that's a strategic decision that you'll have to make, right? So you need to know, okay, I'm uploading my resume onto this website, onto this job board, onto this, I'm uploading it onto Ryerson's database, right? Because Ryerson but my resume needs to be constructed before I do that upload in a way that I know, okay, these are the only positions that I'm targeting in this institution, and so I'm going to frame my resume that way, okay? Okay, resume sections. So I put together a mock resume. It has my name on it. I am not a dietitian. I use this resume for an internationally educated nutrition professionals group. And so we're gonna go through it together according to resume sections. So there are mandatory resume sections, and then there are ones that are optional, okay? The best thing about your resume is that you can structure your resume very strategically based on your experience and what your goals are, right? And so I'll get into detail about that. So ideally, the first thing you need to have a header, obviously. So your name, contact information, email address, phone number. Like we said, if you don't want to put your mailing address, that's fine, but you need to put your city. For those of you who have LinkedIn profiles that are up to date and complete, I would recommend you put your LinkedIn profile in your header. If your LinkedIn profile is not up to date and is not complete, please do not include it in your header. It'll just reflect poorly on you as a candidate. Even if you don't put your LinkedIn header, your LinkedIn URL, some employers will still search you on LinkedIn and look for you anyways. I know my hiring manager did that before I got a job here. So in general, it's good to have a complete up-to-date LinkedIn profile, but if you're not there yet, if it's still a work in progress and you're applying for jobs, don't put it on. So that's your header. Then you want to move on to your profile and or your summary of qualifications. So some people choose, so the example on the resume is a summary of qualifications, it's bullet points. Some people choose to have a profile where it's a paragraph instead. It's really up to you what you prefer. For me personally, I prefer bullet points because they're easier on the eye, and when you're doing that initial 6-second scan, it's just easier for me to follow. I'm gonna get into more detail about what you should be putting in a summary of qualifications, but I'm just going through the sections, okay? And then the next thing you wanna do is you wanna start summarizing your experience, okay? What you'll see on the resume when you take a look is I've created a subheading that says relevant experience, okay? And under relevant experience, you'll see volunteer, internship, and then a dietitian, and then an international dietitian role, okay? So the reason why I've structured it like that is because a lot of times when you relocate to a new country, you're not necessarily working in your field right away, right? Some of you are, but some of you aren't, right? And sometimes, depending on if you're seeking accreditation, if you're doing further schooling, if you're doing certain community programs, sometimes there's a gap, right? Between when you last worked in your field and up until now, right? In that gap, sometimes you are doing volunteer work related to your role. Sometimes you've taken on a survival job in order to finance your education and so forth, right? So the idea is to have a section that says relevant experience, relevant to the role. So for example, if I'm applying for a research position and my professional background is in research, then my first section will say relevant experience, or it could say research experience. You can also categorize it by skill. And what I'm gonna list under there, so let's just say I'm applying for a research position because my background is in clinical research, but right now I'm working a survival job, right? As like a customer service person to finance whatever I need to finance right now. So what some people do is they'll put that customer service position first, right? So you don't want to do that because that's not what's most relevant, right? You want, the first thing to grab the recruiter's eye is your experience that's most relevant to the job you're applying for. So that's why you'll have a section that says relevant experience. And under that section, in reverse chronological order, so starting from the most recent, you will put your most relevant research experience, right? So maybe your most relevant research experience, I'm just using research because today the theme's been research, and I know that we're here like based on the iPad, so that's why I keep referring to research. So perhaps your most relevant was the last position you held before you relocated here. And so that's the first one you'd put. Perhaps the most recent is you're doing volunteer research right now at a nonprofit while you look for work. Then what you would put is the volunteer position, because that is the most recent relevant experience. And then you'd work your way backwards, only for relevant experience, okay? And then you'd have, and then you can move on. I've added another section, as you can see. And this you can decide where you're gonna put it on the resume, depending on how recent it is. I put a section called academic projects, right? Some people choose to label it as academic experience. And there is where you would list experience that was very much only done within an academic context. So for example, if I did a master's, and during my master's, I worked on a specific project that exemplifies skills that I want to highlight because they're on the job posting, then I would list that project under here, right? The reason why it goes under the section academic projects is because I was doing it for a credit, right? I was doing it to receive a grade. I was doing it as part of my coursework, right? Because a lot of times the knowledge and skills that you gain in coursework can be very much applicable. Also, sometimes I look through a job posting and one of the qualifications it says knowledge in X, Y, and Z. But I've never actually used that in a work context, but I did it in school, right? And so that's one way to demonstrate that you have that qualification, okay? And then what you would put after, like I said, they don't need to follow this particular order, this is just the order that I did it here, is you would have a section that says other experience. Other experience is where you would put experience that's not relevant to this field that you're applying for, but that you still think is relevant to put on the resume. So for example, if you are working a survival job, right? And that is the only Canadian experience you have because you're not volunteering and you're not interning anywhere, and you want to demonstrate that you have experience working within a Canadian context, working within a Canadian organizational structure. You can also there demonstrate like communication skills, collaboration skills, teamwork. Then you would put that under other experience, right? It may not be necessary if you're doing current volunteer work or current internship work that is relevant, then you may not even need to add that on, okay? And then after that, like I said, so I put education at the end. You can choose to put it at the top. Like I said, you can structure your resume in whichever way you want, whatever makes sense, whatever is gonna make you competitive and make you stand out. Just a tip for education, what you'll see, what I did here is I listed so you list the most recent, so if you're pursuing any type of certification or degrees right now, that would be the first thing you put because it's the most recent, and then you work your way down. It's always reverse chronological order. What you can tell I did also is underneath the certification, you'll see that I wrote relevant courses, right? And so what I did is I've listed a course that I think is relevant, the name of the course, and then what I'm learning in that course. So you would do that to demonstrate knowledge. So if a posting is asking for specific knowledge, and this is knowledge that you're currently gaining right now in certification or whatever it may be, then that's a way to highlight it, okay? And then after that, I have a section that says professional development. So if you're pursuing professional development, so for example, sometimes we attend like 2-day workshops, right? Or 2-day conferences to learn specific skill sets or to learn about new trends in an industry. Or sometimes we attend like a webinar series, right? If what you're gaining from those professional development, even if it's a 2-day workshop or a conference, if it demonstrates that you're gaining certain knowledge and insight that's relevant to the industry and the role that you're applying for, then you definitely want to put it on, right? Because it shows continuous learning, right? It shows that you're being active member and that you're committed to continuous learning in your field. And it also demonstrates that you're gaining knowledge that's probably, I'm hoping, required on the job posting. Okay? Okay, like we said, presentation is key. I know sometimes this seems like redundant, like we're professionals, we know, but sometimes we miss things. I had an advising appointment today with a very experienced professional, and their formatting was completely off in the resume. The way they had their education, it wasn't aligned, things were not aligned, dates were here, and then institution name was here, and it looked messy, right? You might have all the best content, and if something looks messy, that could automatically disqualify you, right? So you always want to make sure everything's aligned and that it looks very neat. And why? Because that demonstrates that you always have to think, by me doing this, what does it demonstrate to an employer? So I'm going to give you all a very funny story. So we support at Ryerson, we support continuing education students, mature learners, and undergraduate students, right? All ages. So we were having a STEM career fair, and we had a lot of engineering employers at the career fair. So we had a lot of undergraduate engineering students coming to the career fair because they were obviously looking for jobs. And we had a resume clinic set up where we could check their resumes before, I mean at that point it's done, but just to check, give them feedback. So I was helping out at the resume clinic, and I had one of the young aspiring engineers come and sit with me. And I was going through, and he was very ambitious. Like for a third-year student, he had done a lot. He had completed a co-op placement, he had participated in engineering society at school, he had participated in competitions, so he was a really competitive candidate. But he had a lot of spelling mistakes on his resume and his grammar. So as I was reviewing it and I was giving him feedback, I said, you just want to be careful about the spelling mistakes in terms of presentation. And then he looked up at me and he said, look at all this experience that I have. I'm obviously no other, this is not typical of a third-year student. This makes me a competitive candidate. Does it really matter if I have spelling mistakes? So I said to him, do you think attention to detail is very important as an engineer? To be an engineer? And he said, yeah, of course. If we don't have attention to detail, we can miss something, and that could cause a huge issue, right? And I said, okay, so if you can't demonstrate attention to detail on your resume by correcting spelling mistakes, how can an employer trust that you will have attention to detail at work with important initiatives and projects? And he was like, oh, I never thought about it like that. But you always have to think, when I do or do not do something, what does this communicate to the employer and the person looking at my resume about me, right? So that's very important. So font size, 10 to 12. Sometimes we need to go down to 10 because we need to put more stuff on there, right? nothing smaller than 10. Margins, 0.5 to 1 inches. Legible fonts, right? Sometimes we want to get creative and use fonts that are very pretty. Very important thing, after you're done your resume, I always tell people, print it out, right? And just review it and ask yourself, is this easy on the eye, or is this hurting my eyes right now, right? No longer than 2 pages. If it's a CV for an academic position, then it could definitely be longer for 2 pages. But generally within industry, we say try to keep it within 2 pages. A lot of people still put references available upon request at the end of your resume. You don't need to do that. When you are at the interviewing stage, if the hiring committee wants your references, they will ask you for them. Okay, so I quickly want to talk about summary of qualifications, right? So that's the first part on your resume. So ideally here, what you're trying to do in your summary of qualifications is you're giving an overview. So you know when a new movie is coming out, and so they put together like a clip of all the best parts of the movie, and they show it to you, so then you want to go watch the movie, because what they've done is they've taken all the best clips from the movie and they've put it in this like 30-second video, and now you want to go watch the movie because they've showed you all the best clips. That's what your summary of qualifications is. You're taking all the highlights from your career and academic experience, you're putting it into like maybe, I would say, here I said 4 to 5, but you know, mine when I applied was 7 bullet points, right? So you want to keep it at an average. And really what you're doing is you're summarizing things, highlights, right? To capture their attention. So some things you want to do maybe is, some people summarize the number of years of experience they have in a field, right? Sometimes scope, so if I've worked with different demographics or different populations, I might do that. If I've worked in different sectors, I might highlight the different sectors I've worked with, right? If I've used different tools and methodologies, I might summarize all the different, like, for example, like research methodologies or tools that I've used and so forth. Also, this is a good place to highlight, we're not gonna call them soft skills, I like to call them self-management traits instead of soft skills, because it's about how you do your work, right? So if I say I'm collaborative, that's not a soft skill, that's a self-management trait, because that's how I approach my work. If I say that I am a multitasker, then that's how I approach my work. So that's a good place also to highlight some of those self-management traits, not soft skills, right? That are on the job posting. Here's the rule though. If you're gonna highlight that you're an effective collaborator, or that you're a multitasker, or that you know how to work under pressure, under extreme tight deadlines, because that's what's on the job posting. Yes, first of all, what a lot of people do is they just take all those 3, so the job posting wants a multitasker who's effective at collaborating and able to work under tight deadlines. So what they do is they have a bullet point that says, collaborative individual who's a multitasker, and you just list them. 1 skill per bullet point, and make sure you provide proof. If you're gonna say you're a collaborator, then you need to provide proof in that bullet point. How have you demonstrated collaboration skills? Yes.
I'm afraid we're not gonna have time for all this. We have the room till 8:30.
Okay, no worries.
Is it possible maybe for us to post this on the website and start a discussion, and you could check in maybe once or twice?
Yeah, we can post the presentation in a PDF format.
I mean, what you're presenting is wonderful, but I understand you're trying to condense it from what's usually too
Yeah,
long.
I usually actually do an interactive workshop. It's not even, I don't usually talk this much. So, no worries. I understand. I did an event here 2 weeks ago and we have to kick people out too.
So, go ahead, Axel.
So again, I just want to say, as an employer, honestly, I think there are so many ways of doing resumes, and so many wrong ways of doing resumes, and I have to say, obviously you're based on a lot of experience and feedback and talking to employers as well, because I really do agree with the framing for a key resume, 2 pages, chronological, clear, something like, and again, you know, I'm sure maybe you've gone to resume workshops before, or you've seen the material. This is a very good framework.
Thank you.
I really endorse it.
Thank you.
Can I say something? Again, Dina, come to this point. I really appreciate Dina. So we have 155 ITMD. I always bring Dina in my class.
Yes.
And this is the proven our leadership in this field. That's why I request. So can you come in and say, oh yeah, sure, even though late, I will come. So thank you very much, Dina.
No problem.
Yeah.
And also thank you our ITMDs, those who volunteered today. I really forgot to tell you, but you are the best. Thank you very much.